The cherry blossoms were in full bloom when Akira Tanaka first laid his small fingers on piano keys. He was 7 years old, a quiet boy with watchful eyes who preferred to observe rather than participate in the noisy games of his classmates. His elementary school in Kyoto sat nestled between ancient temples and modern apartment buildings, a place where tradition and innovation coexisted, much like in Akira himself. Unlike the stories of many classical musicians, Akira wasn't born into a family of performers or surrounded by Bach and Mozart from the cradle. His father, Hiroshi, repaired electronics in a small shop that smelled of soldering metal and circuit boards. His mother, Yumiko, taught mathematics at a nearby middle school. They lived in a modest apartment where music meant the occasional folk song his grandfather would sing during New Year celebrations or the pop tunes that played on the radio while his mother prepared dinner. The piano that changed everything sat, forgotten in the corner of his school's music room, an old upright with yellowed keys and a slightly warped bench. Most students ignored it, preferring the colorful recorders and simple percussion instruments during music class. But Akira was drawn to it like a moth to flame. "Can I try it?" he asked his music teacher, Mrs. Nakamura, after class one rainy Tuesday. Something in his expression, an intensity unusual in a child so young, made her pause. "Do you know how to play?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. Akira shook his head. "But I want to learn." Mrs. Nakamura was a kind woman in her 50s who had once dreamed of performing in concert halls before settling into the comfortable routine of teaching children the basics of rhythm and melody. She saw something of her younger self in Akira's earnest request. "You can practice during lunch break if you'd like," she offered, not expecting much to come of it. Many children showed initial enthusiasm for instruments only to abandon them when they discovered the discipline required. But Akira was different. The next day, he skipped playing in the schoolyard and instead sat at the piano, pressing each key with deliberate care, listening to the different tones. He brought his lunch to the music room and ate quickly, saving every possible minute for exploration. By the end of the week, he had figured out a simple melody from a children's song by ear. Mrs. Nakamura found him there day after day. Within a month, he was playing simple two-handed songs that she showed him. By the second month, he had worked through a beginner's book she dug out from the school's storage closet. "Have you thought about taking proper lessons?" she asked his parents during the fall parent-teacher conference. "Your son has unusual aptitude." Yumiko and Hiroshi exchanged glances. Piano lessons weren't something they had budgeted for. Private music education in Japan was expensive, especially with good teachers. "We'll consider it," Hiroshi said politely, though his furrowed brow betrayed his concerns about the cost. That night, Akira overheard his parents discussing it in low voices at the kitchen table. "We could cut back on some things," his mother suggested. "Maybe I could take on some tutoring students." His father sighed. "It's not just the lessons. A proper piano. Where would we even put it in the apartment?" Akira slipped back to his bedroom without making a sound. The next day at school, he practiced with even greater determination. When his 8th birthday approached, Akira's parents asked what he wanted as a gift. "Piano books," he said without hesitation. "And maybe a keyboard? It doesn't have to be a real piano." His birthday arrived with a small electronic keyboard, nowhere near a proper piano but with touch-sensitive keys that responded to how hard he pressed them. It was the most expensive gift his parents had ever given him, purchased with money they had been saving for a family trip to visit relatives in Hokkaido. Akira treated the keyboard like a treasure. He set it up on his small desk, using his school chair as a bench. Every day after finishing homework, he practiced until his mother called him for dinner and then practiced more before bed. The walls in their apartment building were thin, so he used headphones after 7 in the evening to avoid disturbing the neighbors. His progress was remarkable even on the limited instrument. By age 9, he could play pieces meant for students several years older. Mrs. Nakamura began bringing him sheet music from her own collection, pieces she had once played herself. "Your hands are still small," she told him as she showed him a simplified version of Beethoven's Für Elise. "But your understanding isn't." One afternoon when Akira was 10, a visitor came to the music room during his lunch practice. Mr. Yamamoto was the high school music teacher who occasionally helped with elementary school concerts. He stood silently at the back of the room, listening as Akira worked through a Mozart sonatina. his feet barely reaching the floor from the piano bench. "Who taught you to play like that?" Mr. Yamamoto asked when Akira finished. The boy jumped slightly, not having noticed the man's entrance. "Mrs. Nakamura helps me and I practice at home." "On a piano?" "A keyboard," Akira admitted. "But it has weighted keys." Mr. Yamamoto nodded thoughtfully. "There's a piano at the community center that sits unused most weekdays. I help coordinate the music programs there. Would you like to practice on a real piano sometimes?" The community center was a 15-minute walk from Akira's school. With his parents' permission, he began going there twice a week. The piano was an old upright, similar to the one at school but better maintained. The rich, resonant sound it produced compared to his keyboard was like comparing a photograph of the ocean to standing on the shore. Both showed the same thing, but one surrounded you, engulfed you, made you part of its world. By 11, Akira had attracted attention beyond his school. He performed in the community center's seasonal showcase, playing pieces that high school students struggled with. A local newspaper ran a small feature about the piano prodigy from an ordinary family, complete with a photo of Akira sitting at the piano, his legs still not quite reaching the pedals. The article caught the eye of Professor Himura, a retired piano teacher from Kyoto University's music department. She attended the next community showcase specifically to hear Akira play. After his performance of Chopin's Waltz in a Minor, she approached his parents. "Your son has a gift," she said simply. "I've taught for 40 years, and I rarely say this, but he needs proper training. Not to become good. He already is good, but to become what he could be." Professor Himura offered to teach Akira herself, charging only a nominal fee that barely covered her transportation costs. "Consider it my contribution to the future of music," she said when Hiroshi began to protest about the arrangement. Besides, at my age, it's refreshing to teach someone with unspoiled enthusiasm. Twice a week, Akira visited Professor Himura's traditional wooden house near the university campus. Her studio contained 2 grand pianos, one for her and one for her student, positioned so they faced each other like black lacquered mirrors. The room smelled of tatami mats and the green tea she always served before they began. Under her guidance, Akira's playing transformed from merely impressive to truly musical. She was a strict teacher who didn't believe in sugarcoating her critiques. "Your fingers are doing the right things," she would say, "but your mind is elsewhere. The notes are correct, but where is the feeling? Where is the story you're telling?" She taught him that each piece of music was a narrative, with characters and conflict and resolution. "When you play Chopin," she explained, "you must understand Poland's suffering, the composer's homesickness, his fragile health but indomitable spirit. The notes are just the alphabet. You must form them into poetry." By 13, Akira had outgrown even Professor Himura's teaching. She arranged for him to audition for the prestigious Kyoto Youth Symphony Orchestra, not as a pianist, they rarely needed one, but as a potential scholarship student in their affiliated academy. The audition was held in a concert hall larger than any room Akira had ever played in. The grand piano on stage was twice the size of Professor Himura's, its lid raised like a great black wing. 5 judges sat in the otherwise empty auditorium, their faces shadowed. Akira chose to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece of gentle beauty that required subtle control rather than flashy technique. As the final notes faded into silence, one of the judges leaned forward into the light. Her eyes were wet. "Young man," she said, "where did you learn to play like that? The scholarship changed everything." Suddenly, Akira had access to professional instruction, master classes with visiting musicians, and most importantly, practice time on concert-quality pianos. His parents, seeing their son thrive, took on extra work to support his new schedule. His father accepting repair jobs on weekends, his mother tutoring in the evenings. But the most significant change was inside Akira himself. Being surrounded by other talented young musicians showed him both how far he had come and how far he still had to go. Some students from wealthy families with musical lineages going back generations had been playing since they were 3. They had traveled to international competitions, studied with famous teachers, owned instruments worth more than his family's apartment. Yet none of this intimidated Akira. Instead, it clarified his path. While others played to please parents or win competitions, he played because the music lived inside him, demanding to be expressed. This fundamental difference began to show in his performances, a genuine emotional quality that technique alone couldn't achieve. As he approached his 14th birthday, Akira's piano teacher at the academy suggested he consider a particularly challenging piece for his year-end recital, a Rachmaninoff prelude known for its technical difficulties. "I was thinking of something else," Akira said quietly. "Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major." The teacher's eyebrows rose. "The heroic? That's exceptionally difficult. University students struggle with it." "I know," Akira said, "but when I hear it, it's like it's already in my hands waiting." The teacher studied him for a long moment. "Bring me the first page next week, memorized, then we'll see." That night, Akira stayed late at the academy practice rooms, working through the opening measures of the Polonaise until a security guard told him it was time to leave. On the train ride home, he continued to play the piece in his mind, his fingers moving slightly on his lap as if pressing invisible keys. He didn't notice the elderly man watching him from across the train car, a man who would later become an important part of his journey. For now, Akira was already lost in the world of Chopin's revolutionary masterpiece, a world he would soon make his own. The elderly man from the train appeared at the academy the following week. His name was Takeshi Noda, once a renowned concert pianist who had studied in Warsaw during his youth. Now in his 70s, he occasionally visited the academy to listen to promising students. Something about the boy on the train, the intensity with which his fingers had moved to invisible music, had caught his attention. Takeshi sat silently at the back of the practice room as 14-year-old Akira played the opening measures of Chopin's heroic Polonaise for his skeptical teacher. Powerful octaves that began the piece thundered from the piano despite Akira's still developing frame. When he reached the fast ascending chromatic scales that many students fumbled, his fingers moved with surprising clarity. He wasn't perfect. His hands weren't yet large enough to comfortably span some of the wider chords, but the musical intention behind each phrase was undeniable. When Akira finished the first page, his teacher nodded slowly. "You've been practicing this before I assigned it, haven't you?" "Only listening," Akira admitted, "and working out some parts on my keyboard at home. With headphones after everyone's asleep," his teacher sighed. "It's too ambitious for the recital, but we can work on it gradually. As a long-term project." Takeshi stood and approached them. "Excuse my intrusion," he said with a polite bow, "but I believe the young man should continue with this piece." Akira's teacher recognized the famous pianist immediately and rose to bow deeply. "Noda-sensei, this is an unexpected honor. I heard this young man playing on the train, or rather not playing, but feeling the music." He turned to Akira. "The way your fingers moved told me you understand something about Chopin that can't be taught." Akira blinked in surprise. "You could tell what piece I was thinking about?" Takeshi smiled. "No, but I could tell you were hearing it with your whole being, not just your ears." He turned to Akira's teacher. "With your permission, I would like to offer this young man some guidance with the heroic, not to replace your excellent teaching, but to supplement it." This unexpected development changed everything. While Akira's regular teacher continued his technical training, once each week he visited Takeshi's small apartment near the old Imperial Gardens. The living room was dominated by a magnificent Bösendorfer grand piano that seemed too large for the space, leaving only narrow pathways to walk around it. "This piano has been with me for 50 years, Takeshi explained during their first session. "Longer than my marriage. She has outlasted many things in my life." He spoke of the instrument as if it were alive, a philosophy that resonated with Akira, who had always felt that pianos had distinct personalities. Their lessons were unlike any Akira had experienced. Sometimes they would spend an entire hour on just 8 measures, not merely repeating notes but exploring the meaning behind them. Other times Takeshi would have Akira put the music aside entirely. "Today we will not play," he announced one rainy afternoon. "Today we will learn about Poland in the 1830s when Chopin wrote this piece." He showed Akira books about the November uprising against Russian rule, paintings depicting the Polish cavalry, and recordings of traditional Polish folk music that influenced Chopin's compositions. For the first time, Akira began to understand that music wasn't just about playing the correct notes, it was about telling stories that mattered. Tour. Heroic Polonaise is not merely a display of technical skill, Takeshi explained. It is Chopin's vision of Poland's struggle and resilience. The opening octaves are like cannons or drums of war. The central melody represents the nobility and spirit of a people fighting for their homeland. When you play, you must become both the battle and the hope for freedom. These philosophical discussions transformed Akira's approach to the piece. His playing began to acquire a maturity that belied his age. Yet as he progressed musically, practical challenges mounted. The academy schedule became increasingly demanding. Akira now spent 3 hours commuting daily between school, piano lessons, theory classes, and home. His grades, once exemplary, began to slip as he struggled to balance academic responsibilities with his musical pursuits. His parents noticed his exhaustion, but also his determination. "Perhaps you should focus more on school," his father suggested one evening, watching Akira fall asleep over his mathematics homework. "Music can remain a serious hobby." Akira looked up, suddenly alert. "It's not a hobby, Dad, He searched for words. "It's like breathing now." His parents exchanged concerned glances but didn't press further. That weekend, they rearranged their small apartment, moving Akira's futon into the living room to convert his bedroom into a dedicated practice space. They couldn't afford a real piano, but they invested in a better digital keyboard with fully weighted keys that more closely mimicked a grand piano's action. As Akira's 15th birthday approached, Takeshi made an unexpected proposal. "The Tokyo International Piano Competition will hold preliminaries next year," he said during one of their sessions. "The youth division accepts contestants up to age 17. You should enter." Akira stared at him. The Tokyo competition was one of the most prestigious in Asia. Winners often launched international careers and received scholarships to music schools in Europe or America. "I'm not ready for something like that," he protested. "Not today," Takeshi agreed. "But you have 14 months to prepare. With the right piece, perhaps the heroic Polonaise, you could make a strong impression." The idea seemed impossible. Most competitors in such events had been training intensively for a decade or more with famous teachers. Many came from musical families with connections throughout the classical music world. Akira was just a boy from Kyoto whose parents couldn't even afford a real piano. Yet the seed was planted. That night he researched past competitions, watching videos of previous winners. Their technical proficiency was intimidating. But something else struck him. Many played with mechanical perfection but little personal connection to the music. "I could be different," he whispered to himself in the darkness of his makeshift bedroom. The next day, Akira approached his parents with a plan that shocked them. "I want to work part-time to pay for lessons with a master teacher in Tokyo," he announced over dinner. "Someone who specializes in preparing students for international competitions." His mother set down her chopsticks. "Tokyo? That's a 3-hour train ride." "I'd go twice a month on Sundays," Akira explained. "I've researched everything. There's an early morning train that would get me there by 9, and I could take an evening train back. I'd only miss 1 day of school every 2 weeks." His father frowned. "These special lessons, how much would they cost?" When Akira named the figure, his parents' expressions confirmed what he already knew. It was beyond their means, even with their combined incomes. "That's why I need to work," he continued. "The convenience store near the station is hiring students for weekend shifts." "You're only 15, his mother protested. "Between school, your current lessons, and practice time, when would you sleep?" "I'll manage," Akira insisted with the unwavering confidence of youth. "This is my chance to prove I belong in that world." After much discussion and compromise, his parents reluctantly agreed to a modified version of his plan. Akira would work Saturday mornings and afternoons at the convenience store. His father would match whatever he earned to help cover the Tokyo lessons. In return, Akira promised to maintain his grades and to rest properly. The convenience store job was Akira's first experience with the working world. He stocked shelves, operated the register, and sometimes helped elderly customers carry purchases to their cars. The manager, learning about Akira's musical aspirations, allowed him flexibility when competition preparation intensified. His first trip to Tokyo for a lesson with Master Kobayashi was intimidating. The bustling metropolis made Kyoto feel like a quiet village by comparison. The music conservatory where Master Kobayashi taught loomed like a temple to classical music, its practice rooms filled with students who seemed to play effortlessly. Master Kobayashi himself was a stern, compact man in his 60s who had studied with Russian teachers and brought their rigorous methods to Japan. He didn't smile when Akira played his prepared piece, and his first words were hardly encouraging. Your technique is unrefined. Your interpretation is immature. But, he paused, there is something honest in your playing. Something many of my more polished students lack. He agreed to take Akira as a student with one condition. Bring me something new each time. Not just better playing of the same piece, but deeper understanding. Show me your thinking between our sessions. The schedule Akira now maintained would have broken many adults. He rose at 5 each morning to practice before school. After classes, he continued at the academy until evening. Twice monthly, he made the long journey to Tokyo. On Saturdays, he worked at the convenience store, often practicing fingering patterns on the counter when no customers were present. Sundays, his only free day, were dedicated to schoolwork and more practice. His 16th birthday passed with little celebration, just a small cake his mother brought home and a music theory book from his father. But Akira barely noticed the modest commemoration. His mind was increasingly consumed by Chopin's heroic Polonaise, which was slowly becoming an extension of himself. The piece, with its contrasting sections of thunderous power and delicate lyricism, seemed to contain all the emotions Akira experienced during this challenging time. Determination, doubt, hope, exhaustion, and moments of pure joy when a difficult passage finally yielded to his persistent practice. You're becoming too obsessed, his school friend Kenji commented one lunch period, when he found Akira silently practicing finger movements instead of eating. There's more to life than piano competitions. Akira looked up, genuinely puzzled. Like what? Kenji laughed. Movies? Video games, girls? Normal teenage stuff. But normalcy had slipped away from Akira months ago. The competition was no longer just a distant goal. It had become the organizing principle of his existence. Every decision, from what he ate, nothing that would make his fingers swell, to when he slept, never less than 7 hours before a major practice session, was calculated to optimize his performance. 6 months before the competition preliminaries, both Takeshi and Master Kobayashi declared that his technical mastery of the heroic Polonaise was nearly complete. What remained was deeper: the refinement of interpretation, the projection of emotion, the elusive quality that separates competent players from true artists. You must find your own voice in Chopin's music, Takeshi advised. Not just play the notes as written, but discover what they mean specifically to you. As spring bloomed across Japan, Akira felt himself on the verge of a breakthrough. The piece was firmly in his fingers. Now it needed to move fully into his heart. Little did he know that fate was about to intervene in a way that would threaten everything he had worked for, and ultimately transform his playing forever. The accident happened on a rainy Saturday in April, just 5 months before the competition preliminaries. Akira had finished his shift at the convenience store and rushed home to help his father move a heavy television that a customer had brought in for repair. Be careful with the corner, his father warned as they maneuvered the old CRT set through the narrow doorway of their apartment. Perhaps it was fatigue from his long week, or maybe the floor was more slippery than he realized. But Akira's foot slid suddenly. As the heavy television tilted, he instinctively threw his right hand out to stop it from crashing to the floor. A sharp pain shot through his wrist as the weight of the television briefly pressed against it before his father managed to stabilize the load. "Are you all right?" Hiroshi asked, noticing his son's grimace. Akira flexed his fingers experimentally. "I think so. Just twisted it a bit." But by that evening, his wrist had swollen noticeably and a dull throb had settled into the joint. His mother insisted they visit the hospital, where X-rays revealed no broken bones but confirmed a moderate sprain. "You'll need to wear this brace for at least 3 weeks," the doctor explained, securing Akira's wrist in a rigid support. "And you should avoid any activities that strain the joint for at least 3 months. 3 months. The words fell like stones in Akira's stomach. The competition preliminaries were in 5 months. Even if he healed perfectly, he would lose crucial preparation time. "What about piano playing?" he asked, his voice tight. The doctor gave him a sympathetic look. "Definitely not for the next few weeks. After that, you'll need to start very gradually. Wrist sprains can become chronic problems if not properly healed." That night, Akira lay awake in the darkness, his right arm propped on a pillow, the enormity of this setback washing over him in waves. Everything he had sacrificed and worked toward now hung in the balance because of one careless moment. The next day, he called Master Kobayashi to explain his situation. Bracing himself for disappointment or perhaps even dismissal, the master's response was characteristically blunt. "This is unfortunate timing, but not necessarily a disaster. Pianists throughout history have faced physical setbacks. Your response to this challenge will reveal your true potential more than any competition could." When Akira asked if he should withdraw from the competition, Kobayashi's answer surprised him. "Not yet. Come to Tokyo next weekend as planned. We'll assess the situation and make adjustments." During that week, Akira fell into a depression unlike anything he had experienced before. He attended school mechanically but found himself staring at the bandaged wrist during classes, calculating the days and hours of practice he was losing. Each moment felt like precious water slipping through his fingers. His parents watched his mood darken with concern. "Perhaps this is a sign," his father suggested gently one evening. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. Maybe you should focus more on school now. Consider university options." "No," Akira interrupted with unexpected force. "This isn't the end." Though he couldn't touch a piano, Akira refused to surrender completely to idleness. He began listening to recordings of the heroic Polonaise with renewed intensity. Not just by famous performers but obscure interpretations he found online, each offering a slightly different perspective on the piece. He studied the score with pencil in his left hand, making notes and observations. He researched Chopin's life more deeply, reading biographies and letters that gave him insight into the composer's mind. He watched documentaries about Poland's struggle for independence that had inspired the triumphant character of the Polonaise. And most unusually, he began what he called left-hand training. While his right wrist was immobilized, he devoted hours each day to strengthening and improving the dexterity of his left hand through exercises and simplified pieces written for left hand alone. "If I can't use both hands," he reasoned, "I'll make one hand twice as good." When Akira arrived in Tokyo for his lesson with Master Kobayashi, he expected to discuss theory or perhaps analyze recordings together. Instead, the master led him directly to the piano. "Play the opening of the heroic," he instructed. "Left hand only," Akira hesitated. "Just the bass line?" "No, adapt the piece. Show me what you can do with one hand." The challenge seemed impossible. The Polonaise was fundamentally a two-handed composition with a demanding right-hand melody and complex left-hand accompaniment. How could he capture its essence with just 5 fingers? Yet as Akira sat before the keys, solutions began to form in his mind. He could play the powerful octave intro with his left hand in a slightly slower tempo. For passages where melody and harmony intertwined, he would need to choose the essential notes, creating a suggestion of the full texture rather than a literal transcription. His first attempt was halting and sparse, the second slightly more confident. By the third try, he was discovering creative ways to imply both melody and bass with careful use of the pedal and strategic voice, leading. Master Kobayashi watched without comment until Akira finished his experiment. "This is your path forward," he said finally. "While your right hand heals, you will develop your left beyond what most pianists achieve in a lifetime. This injury may become your greatest teacher." Over the next weeks, Akira immersed himself in this unusual approach. He discovered compositions written specifically for the left hand, pieces by Scriabin, Godowsky, and Ravel, that revealed the hidden capabilities of a single hand. He studied recordings by pianists who had overcome physical limitations, most notably Paul Wittgenstein, who had continued his career after losing his right arm in World War I. Each day, his left hand grew stronger, more precise, more expressive. The deep bass melodies that often went unnoticed in two-handed playing now gained prominence and character under his focused attention. He developed techniques to create the illusion of multiple voices from 5 fingers, learning to highlight certain notes while ghosting others. When the doctor finally removed his brace after 4 weeks, Akira's right wrist was stiff and noticeably weaker than before. Physical therapy exercises helped gradually rebuild its strength, but his piano teacher at the academy advised caution. "You should consider a less demanding piece for the competition," she suggested. "The heroic Polonaise puts tremendous strain on the wrist with those octave passages and wide stretches." But Akira had traveled too far down this path to change course now. Besides, something unexpected had happened during his forced hiatus from two-handed playing. His understanding of the Polonaise had deepened in ways that might never have occurred otherwise. "I heard things I never noticed before," he tried to explain to Takeshi during one of their sessions. His right hand now free but still wrapped in a supportive bandage. "There's an entire world in the left-hand part that I used to just play through without really listening." Takeshi nodded thoughtfully. Limitations can become doorways to discovery. Many of history's greatest interpretive insights came from working around obstacles. As the weeks passed and the competition drew nearer, Akira began the delicate process of reuniting his hands at the keyboard. His right hand, though improving daily, still lacked its former strength and surety. Yet its weakness forced him to approach the piece differently, relying less on power and more on nuance, using the weight of his arm rather than just finger strength, finding places to rest and breathe within the music. Meanwhile, his left hand had developed remarkable independence and expressivity. The bass lines sang with unprecedented clarity. The harmony felt richer, more purposeful. When both hands played together, it was as if a conversation was taking place rather than one hand merely accompanying the other. 3 months after the injury, with just 8 weeks remaining before the preliminaries, Akira played the complete Polonaise for both his teachers. His right hand was still not at full strength, and he had made subtle adjustments to certain passages to accommodate this limitation. Yet something extraordinary had emerged from these constraints. "Your playing has changed," Master Kobayashi observed. "Before you were attempting to conquer this piece with technical prowess. Now you are revealing its inner architecture, its emotional landscape." Takeshi was more direct. "You have found Chopin's heart in this music." With the competition looming, Akira increased his practice time carefully, mindful not to re-injure his wrist. He developed a precise regimen, 20 minutes of playing followed by stretches and a 5-minute rest, then repeat. He applied heat before practice sessions and ice afterward. He wore his supportive bandage during longer practice periods and removed it for shorter, more intensive work. His mother noticed him grimacing occasionally while playing particularly demanding passages. "Is it worth this pain?" she asked one evening, placing a cup of green tea beside his keyboard. Akira flexed his hand thoughtfully. "It's not really pain anymore, more like awareness. I can feel exactly how much I can safely do now." "And the competition? Are you sure you're ready?" He considered the question seriously. The preliminary round was just 6 weeks away. Many of the other contestants would be older, more experienced, with perfectly functioning wrists and years of competition experience. "I'm not the same pianist I was before the injury," he said slowly. "I might be better." This wasn't bravado. During his recovery, Akira had been forced to develop aspects of musicianship that many young pianists neglect in their pursuit of technical brilliance. Deep listening, economical movement, strategic use of energy, and most importantly, finding meaning in every note rather than just playing through passages. As the preliminary round approached, Akira faced one final challenge. The competition required participants to submit 3 contrasting pieces, not just the heroic Polonaise. With his practice time limited by his recovery, preparing additional works to competition level seemed impossible. Takeshi proposed an unconventional solution. "Choose pieces that complement your new strengths," he advised. "A Baroque work that showcases your left hand's independence, and perhaps a modern piece where color and intention matter more than virtuosic display." Following this guidance, Akira selected Bach's Prelude in C-sharp minor, with its complex counterpoint, and Debussy's Footprints in the Snow, a piece that demanded atmospheric control rather than technical fireworks. When Akira submitted his final registration forms for the Tokyo International Piano Competition, he included a note explaining that he was recovering from a wrist injury. He didn't ask for special consideration. He merely wanted the judges to know that what they would hear represented not just his playing, but his resilience. The night before leaving for Tokyo and the preliminaries, Akira sat alone at his keyboard, the apartment quiet around him. His parents had already gone to bed, wanting to be well rested for tomorrow's early train. Slowly, thoughtfully, he placed his hands on the keys and began to play. Not Chopin or Bach or Debussy, but a simple folk melody his grandfather had taught him years ago. His right wrist still ached slightly with certain movements, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. Yet as his fingers moved across the keys, Akira realized that the injury had given him something precious, a deeper relationship with music itself. Whatever happened tomorrow in Tokyo, that could never be taken from him. Tokyo was a sea of light and noise when Akira and his parents arrived the day before the preliminaries. They had splurged on a modest business hotel near the competition venue, a necessary expense to ensure Akira would be well rested and free from the stress of commuting on competition day. That evening, they visited the concert hall where he would perform. The Suntory Hall stood like a modern temple to music, its warm wooden interior designed specifically for perfect acoustics. Akira had never played in such a prestigious venue. Standing in the lobby, looking at photographs of world-famous musicians who had performed there, he felt both intimidated and strangely at home. "They're just people who practiced a lot," his father said, noticing his son's wide eyes as he gazed at the images of legendary pianists. Akira smiled. "Some of them practiced with 2 good hands, though." His mother squeezed his shoulder gently. "And some of them faced much worse than a sprained wrist. Beethoven was deaf. Remember what Master Kobayashi told you. Obstacles can become advantages." They weren't allowed inside the main hall, but a kind security guard permitted them a quick peek through the doors. The space was vast, with tiered seating facing a stage dominated by a magnificent Steinway concert grand piano. Akira tried to imagine playing there tomorrow, with judges and audience members listening to every note. "How many people will be watching?" his mother asked. "The preliminary round is closed to the public," Akira explained. "Just the 7 judges and some competition officials." Somehow this was more intimidating than a full audience. 7 expert judges focused entirely on detecting every flaw, every hesitation in his playing. Back at the hotel, Akira's parents noticed his growing tension. "Early dinner and then rest," his father declared. "No practicing tonight," Akira started to protest, but his mother cut him off. "Your hands know what to do. Your mind needs calm now." After a simple meal at a nearby restaurant, Akira soaked his right wrist in warm water, performed his stretching routine, and tried to sleep. His mind, however, had other plans. For hours he lay awake, playing the pieces mentally, imagining various scenarios, making mistakes, recovering from them, judges frowning or nodding in approval. Around midnight he quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake his parents in the adjoining room. In the darkness, he sat cross-legged on the floor and began a breathing exercise Takeshi had taught him. Focus on the breath, not the thoughts. Let the music exist without judgment. Gradually his racing heart slowed, and sometime after 1 a.m., he finally drifted to sleep. Morning arrived with gray skies and light rain, fitting weather for Chopin, Akira thought as he dressed in the formal black suit his parents had purchased for the occasion. His competition slot wasn't until 2 p.m., but they arrived at the hall early to register and familiarize themselves with the backstage area. The competitors' waiting room buzzed with nervous energy. Most participants were older than Akira, university students or recent graduates, many already looking like professional musicians with confident postures and expensive clothes. They warmed up on silent keyboards, reviewed scores, or paced while listening to recordings through headphones. Akira found a quiet corner and began his own preparation routine. First, gentle stretches for both hands, paying special attention to his right wrist. Then, mental practice. Running through each piece with his eyes closed, feeling the music without physically playing it. A competition coordinator approached with a clipboard. "Tanaka-san, there's been a small change in the schedule. You'll perform at 1:30 instead of 2. Akira nodded, trying to hide his surge of anxiety at this unexpected change. 30 minutes might seem insignificant, but his carefully planned warm-up routine would now need to be compressed. As he continued his preparation, Akira overheard snippets of conversation from nearby competitors. "That Korean guy who just finished was incredible," one whispered. "His list was flawless. Did you hear about the American contestant? She's already won 3 international competitions this year. They say one of the judges studied directly with Rubinstein. He fails anyone who doesn't play Chopin exactly as Rubinstein taught." Akira closed his eyes tighter, trying to shut out these intimidating rumors. "Focus on your own music," he reminded himself, "your own voice." At 1 p.m., he was led to a practice room with a piano to warm up physically. His right wrist felt stiff, perhaps from the rainy weather, perhaps from stress. He moved through his shortened routine carefully, playing fragments rather than complete pieces, ensuring his hands were responsive without tiring them. At 1:25, another coordinator appeared. 5 minutes, Tanaka-san. Akira took a deep breath and stood. His parents, waiting in the hallway, gave him encouraging smiles. His father, usually so reserved, pulled him into a quick embrace. "Remember why you play," he said simply. The stage door opened, and Akira walked into the vast space of Suntory Hall. Under the bright lights, the empty seats seemed to watch him like thousands of silent observers. At the center stood the gleaming Steinway, its lid raised to project sound to the furthest corners of the hall. The 7 judges sat at a long table about 20 rows back, far enough to assess the acoustic balance, close enough to observe his technique. They were a formidable group, distinguished professors, renowned performers and competition veterans, their faces impassive as they made notes on their evaluation sheets. Akira approached the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a moment to gather himself. The instrument before him was worth more than his family's apartment. A concert grand with a rich, resonant bass and crystalline high register. He had only 20 minutes to form a relationship with it, to make it speak with his voice. He would begin with Bach's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a strategic choice to establish his control of counterpoint and the independence of his hands. The piece began softly, almost introspectively, with interweaving lines that required precise balance. As his fingers made contact with the keys, something unexpected happened. Rather than feeling intimidated by the magnificent instrument, Akira felt a sense of homecoming. This piano responded to the slightest nuance, revealing colors and textures he could only approximate on his electronic keyboard or the Academy's uprights. The Bach flowed with a natural pulse, each voice distinct yet part of a larger conversation. When he reached the final cadence, Akira allowed just 2 seconds of silence before transitioning to Debussy's Footprints in the Snow. This delicate piece required a completely different touch, a watercolor painting after Bach's precise architecture. The opening notes needed to sound like soft footsteps in freshly fallen snow, each one clear but ephemeral. Here, Akira's months of focused listening during his recovery paid dividends. He created a hushed atmosphere, drawing the judges into a winter landscape painted with sound. As the final notes of Debussy faded, Akira straightened his posture slightly. Now came the moment everything had been building toward, Chopin's heroic Polonaise. He flexed his right wrist briefly, feeling the familiar twinge that remained even after months of healing. The opening octaves thundered across the hall with controlled power, not as forceful as some interpretations perhaps, but with an undeniable authority that commanded attention. When he reached the challenging running passages that followed, his fingers moved with newfound clarity, each note given its precise weight and duration. Then came the famous left-hand octave section, the part he had focused on so intensively during his recovery. Here, Akira's interpretation diverged most notably from tradition. Where many pianists treated this as mere accompaniment to the right hand's melody, Akira gave it prominence, revealing the rich narrative embedded in these pounding octaves. They were not just support but the heartbeat of Poland itself, steady, resolute, unbreakable. When the right hand finally soared above with its heroic theme, the effect was like sun breaking through storm clouds. The months of playing left hand alone had transformed how these hands spoke to each other, not as dominant and subordinate, but as equal voices in a national epic. The middle section, with its lyrical contrast, flowed like a river of memory, perhaps Chopin's recollections of his homeland. Akira allowed the tempo to breathe here, not rushing toward the dramatic conclusion but giving weight to this moment of reflection before the battle resumed. As he approached the final pages, with their escalating intensity and technical demands, Akira felt his right wrist beginning to fatigue. Rather than panic, he made a split-second adjustment, slightly redistributing some passages between his hands, allowing the left to support more weight while the right focused on clarity rather than power. The final chords rang through the hall like a declaration, followed by a moment of complete silence. Akira remained still, hands hovering above the keys, letting the last vibrations dissipate naturally before lowering them to his lap. The head judge made a small gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Tanaka." Akira bowed slightly and walked off stage, his heart pounding. In the waiting area, his parents stood anxiously. "How did it go?" his mother whispered. "I'm not sure," he answered honestly. "It felt different than any time I've played before." They wouldn't learn the results until evening. The hours stretched endlessly as they sat in a nearby cafe, trying to distract themselves with conversation that inevitably circled back to the competition. "No matter what happens," his father said, "you've already accomplished something remarkable. From that old-school piano to Suntory Hall in just a few years." Akira nodded, but inside he felt conflicted. Part of him was proud of simply making it this far despite everything. Another part desperately wanted validation, confirmation that his unconventional journey had led to something meaningful. At 7 p.m., they returned to the hall for the announcement of finalists. Competitors and their families gathered in the lobby, some confidently expecting to advance, others preparing for disappointment. The competition director appeared with a printed list. "The following 10 participants will advance to tomorrow's final round," she announced, beginning to read names in alphabetical order. Akira held his breath as she moved through the alphabet. Several expected names appeared: the Korean virtuoso, the American competition veteran. As she approached the end of the list, his hope began to fade. Tanaka, Akira. His name spoken so casually among these accomplished musicians. His parents gripped his hands tightly, their faces alight with joy and surprise. A distinguished-looking man approached them as the crowd dispersed. Professor Yamamoto, one of the judges. "Interesting interpretation of the Polonaise," he said to Akira. "Quite unconventional." Akira tensed, unsure if this was criticism or praise. "There was some debate among the judges," Yamamoto continued. "Some felt your approach was too unorthodox, but what convinced us was its authenticity. You weren't being different to be different. You found your own truth in the music." He glanced down at Akira's right hand, which was unconsciously rubbing his wrist. "The injury forced you to listen differently, didn't it?" Akira nodded, surprised by the judge's perception. "Sometimes our limitations become our signature," Yamamoto said thoughtfully. "In tomorrow's finals, don't try to play like anyone else. We have enough technically perfect clones. What we need are musicians with something personal to say." As Professor Yamamoto walked away, Akira felt a curious sense of calm replace his earlier anxiety. Tomorrow he would play the entire Polonaise again in the final round, competing against pianists with flawless technique and years more experience. But for the first time, he understood that the competition wasn't really against them. It was against the limits of his own imagination, his ability to find and express the deeper meaning behind the notes on the page. That night, as his parents slept in their hotel room, Akira sat by the window watching the Tokyo lights shimmer through the rain. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. But today, he had spoken with his own voice, and someone had listened. The morning of the finals dawned bright and clear, as if the previous day's rain had washed Tokyo clean. Akira woke early, his mind already cycling through fragments of the heroic Polonaise. For today's final round, he would perform only this piece. The competition rules allowed each finalist to showcase their strongest work. Unlike yesterday's closed preliminaries, today's performances would be open to the public and broadcast live on classical music channels. As Akira and his parents arrived at Suntory Hall, they were surprised by the crowd gathering outside. Not just the usual classical music audience of elderly patrons and serious students, but groups of teenagers and young professionals. "What's happening?" Akira asked a staff member as they entered through the competitor's entrance. The woman smiled. Word spread about a 17-year-old playing Chopin with an unusual approach. Several music blogs mentioned you specifically after yesterday's results were announced. This unexpected attention added a new layer of pressure. Akira had prepared himself to play for judges, but a curious public was different, especially one that came with specific expectations about his interpretation. In the competitors' lounge, the atmosphere was notably more tense than yesterday. The 10 finalists kept to themselves, each absorbed in their own preparation rituals. Akira noticed that he was the youngest by at least 3 years. Most finalists were university students or recent graduates, their formal attire and confident demeanor marking them as emerging professionals rather than students. Akira found a quiet corner and began his warm-up exercises, gently rotating his wrists and stretching his fingers. His right wrist felt better than yesterday. Perhaps the rest had helped. Or maybe the success of advancing to the finals had relieved some tension in his body. a competition coordinator approached with the performance schedule. Akira would play seventh, not ideal as it meant a long wait, but it gave him time to mentally prepare and listen to some of his competitors. Takeshi had taught him that listening to others before performing could be either valuable or destructive, depending on your mindset. If you listen with comparison in your heart, it will only create doubt, the old pianist had explained. But if you listen with appreciation, recognizing that each artist brings something unique, it can inspire you to express your own truth more clearly. With this advice in mind, Akira decided to listen to the first three performers before retreating to focus on his own preparation. The first finalist, a tall, serious-looking university student from Russia, played Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 2 with stunning technical prowess, his hands seeming to be everywhere at once, filling the hall with cascades of perfectly articulated notes. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. The second performer, a composed young woman from Germany, presented a refined interpretation of Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata. Her playing was intellectually rigorous, each structural element clearly delineated. The architecture of the piece revealed with scholarly precision. The third finalist chose Liszt's Mephisto Waltz, attacking the keyboard with dramatic flair and virtuosic abandon. His performance was theatrical, designed to showcase superhuman technique and stamina. After this third performance, Akira quietly left the auditorium. Each of these pianists possessed qualities he could never match: the Russian's technical perfection, the German's intellectual depth, the third pianist's dramatic showmanship. If he tried to compete on their terms, he would surely fail. In a small practice room backstage, Akira closed his eyes and remembered Professor Yamamoto's words. Don't try to play like anyone else. What, then, was his unique contribution? What could he offer that these accomplished musicians could not? The answer came not as words but as an image. His grandfather singing folk songs during New Year celebrations, his voice untrained but filled with genuine feeling and connection to the music's origins. What made those songs moving wasn't technical perfection, but authentic expression of human experience. Could he bring that same authenticity to Chopin's formal composition? Could he find the folk heart beating beneath the sophisticated structure? For the next hour, Akira didn't practice in the conventional sense. Instead, he thought deeply about Chopin. Not the revered classical composer studied in conservatories, but the young Polish expatriate writing music, filled with longing for his homeland during a time of political oppression. He recalled what Takeshi had taught him about the Polonaise as a dance form, originally performed at court ceremonies but evolving into a symbol of national identity. The heroic Polonaise wasn't just a difficult piece for piano, it was a statement of cultural resilience in musical form. When the coordinator came to tell him he was next, Akira felt oddly calm. His hands were warm, his mind clear. His parents waited in the hallway, looking more nervous than he felt. Remember why you play, his father said again, echoing yesterday's advice. His mother straightened his collar and smoothed the stray hair. Just be Akira, she said simply. When he walked onto the stage, Akira was momentarily startled by the full house. Every seat was occupied, from the orchestra level to the highest balcony. The lights were dimmed in the audience area, but he could sense the collective anticipation filling the space. At the Steinway, he took a moment to adjust the bench, flexed his hands lightly, and nodded to indicate he was ready. A hush fell over the hall. In this moment of silence before the first note, Akira made a decision. Instead of approaching the Polonaise as a competition piece, something to be executed according to established standards, he would treat it as a story he needed to tell. A story about courage and national identity that resonated with his own journey of overcoming limitations. The opening octaves rang out with deliberate restraint, not the crashing statement many performers made, but something more nuanced, like a distant call to attention. As the piece progressed, Akira allowed himself freedoms he had never taken before. Certain phrases were extended slightly to heighten their emotional impact. Dynamic contrasts became more pronounced, the quietest passages barely audible, forcing the audience to lean in and truly listen. When he reached the famous left-hand octave section, the part he had worked on so intensively during his recovery, Akira gave it unprecedented prominence. These weren't just accompaniment figures, but the foundation of the entire piece, the steady pulse of a nation's heartbeat against oppression. In the middle lyrical section, Akira took a risk that would have horrified traditionalists. He slowed the tempo dramatically, transforming what was often played as a brief respite into a profound moment of remembrance and reflection. This wasn't showmanship, but storytelling, creating space for the emotional heart of the piece to fully emerge before the heroic struggle resumed. As the final section approached, with its escalating intensity and technical challenges, Akira felt his right wrist begin to protest. Rather than fighting through the pain or concealing his limitation, he made it part of the performance, adjusting voicings and redistributing certain passages between his hands in ways that maintained the music's power while acknowledging human frailty. The final chords, often hammered out as a triumphant conclusion, emerged from Akira's hands with complex emotion, victory tinged with sacrifice, celebration carrying the memory of struggle. He held the final resonance with the pedal, letting it vibrate through the hall until it naturally faded to silence. For several seconds, no one moved or made a sound. Akira remained still at the piano, his hands now resting in his lap, his head slightly bowed, not in theatrical gesture but in genuine completion of the emotional journey. Then the applause began. It started in scattered pockets and quickly grew into sustained, enthusiastic recognition that filled the space. As Akira stood and bowed, he was surprised to see many audience members standing, first a few, then entire rows, until much of the hall was on its feet. Even more surprising were the faces of the judges. These experienced professionals, usually maintaining careful neutrality, showed visible reactions. One older judge was discreetly wiping her eyes. Another was nodding with an expression of profound appreciation. Professor Yamamoto was smiling openly. Backstage, Akira was met not only by his beaming parents but by several of the other competitors, who approached with congratulations and curious questions. "I've never heard the left hand brought out like that," said the Russian pianist. "It completely changes how you hear the structure." "Where did you study?" asked another finalist. "Who is your teacher?" These questions from such accomplished musicians, people he had viewed with intimidation just hours earlier, left Akira momentarily speechless. How could he explain his unconventional path? The old upright at his elementary school, the electronic keyboard in his bedroom, the injury that forced him to reimagine his approach to the instrument. The final three performers completed their programs, and then came the agonizing wait for results. Competition staff explained that the judges needed extra time for deliberation. Apparently, there was more discussion than usual. After nearly an hour, the audience was asked to return to their seats. The finalists lined up on stage, Akira standing between a tall university student from China and the composed German woman, feeling younger and less polished than everyone around him. The competition director approached the microphone with an envelope. "Before announcing our winners, I want to note something unusual about this year's competition. Our judges found themselves engaged in one of the most vigorous debates in recent memory, not about technical excellence, which was abundant in all our finalists, but about the very nature of musical interpretation and artistic voice." She paused, scanning the 10 young musicians standing on stage. Third prize goes to Dmitry Orlovsky. The Russian pianist stepped forward to receive his award, bowing deeply as the audience applauded. Second prize is awarded to Hana Mizuki, a Japanese woman in her early 20s, the only other Japanese finalist, moved forward with elegant composure. Akira had heard her play a crystalline, perfectly structured Bach program earlier in the day. And finally, first prize goes to... The pause seemed eternal. Akira Tanaka. For a moment, Akira was certain he had misheard. It was only when his fellow competitors began applauding, and the German woman beside him gave him a gentle nudge, that he stepped forward. The competition director handed him an envelope and a small trophy. Cameras flashed. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Through his daze, Akira managed to bow and smile, but the director wasn't finished. "Additionally, the judges have decided to present a special recognition this year. For the first time in our competition's history, we are eliminating the age divisions for future events. Mr. Tanaka's performance has demonstrated that artistic maturity,